With these can-do videos, you'll see real-life situations where you have to introduce yourself, talk about your family, or give your contact information. So, by the end, you can do them yourself in Italian. This video is a small portion of our can-do course. To get the full course, including translations, grammar tools, and assessment tests, click the link in the description.
Welcome to Can Do Italian by ItalianPod101.com.
Ciao a tutti, sono Felice Angelini. Hi everyone, I am Felice Angelini. In this lesson, you learn how to ask what a word is in Italian.
This is Ben Lee, and he's at a cafe doing a language exchange with his classmate, Federica Fontana. It's the Italian portion of the exchange, and he points at the textbook and asks, "How do you say book in Italian?"
Come si dice book in italiano?
Listen to the conversation and focus on the question. Ready?
Come si dice book in italiano?
Si dice libro.
Once more with the English translation.
Come si dice book in italiano?
How do you say book in Italian?
Si dice libro.
You say book.
Wondering how you can master these conversations even faster? Here's how. 1. Read along. You get the lesson conversation and translations inside our dialogue tool so that you see each word as you hear it and understand it all. 2. Practice speaking. By shadowing what you hear, you can also record and compare yourself with native speakers with our voice recording tools. And 3. Take our assessment tests and see how much you remember. These tools are part of our Can Do course. Just click the link in the description to get them.
Let's take a closer look at the conversation.
Do you remember how Ben asks, "How do you say book in Italian?"
Come si dice book in italiano?
The standard way to ask for the meaning of a word in Italian follows a simple pattern. First is
Come,
translating as how in this context.
come, come.
Next is
Si dice,
one says.
si dice. Si,
One, roughly translating as one, as in one says.
si, si.
Next is the word
Dice,
says, as in one says,
dice. Dice,
is from the verb
dire,
meaning to say.
dire.
Together,
Come si dice.
literally, how one says, but translates as how does one say.
Come si dice.
After this is the English word book. Last is the phrase
In italiano.
meaning in Italian.
In italiano.
First is
In.
in.
In. In.
After this is
Italiano.
Italian, as in the Italian language.
Italiano. Italiano.
Note, when the context is clear, you may omit
In italiano.
altogether
Come si dice book in italiano?
means something like how one says book in Italian, but translates as how does one say book in Italian? And in more natural English, how do you say book in Italian? Note the rising intonation of the sentence to mark that it's a question.
Come si dice book in italiano?
Let's take a closer look at the response.
Do you remember how Federica says, you say book?
Si dice libro.
First is the phrase,
Si dice.
which literally means one says, but translates here as you say.
Si dice.
After this is the answer to the question,
Libro.
book.
Libro. Libro.
Altogether,
Si dice libro.
literally means one says book, but it translates as you say book.
Si dice libro.
The pattern is,
Come si dice English word in italiano?
how do you say English word in Italian?
Come si dice English word in italiano?
To use this pattern, simply replace the English word placeholder with the word you want to know. Imagine you want to know the Italian word for pen. Ask, how do you say pen in Italian? Ready?
Come si dice pen in italiano?
How do you say pen in Italian?
Come si dice pen in italiano?
This lesson introduces a grammatically complex but commonly used pattern, the impersonal form with si. The si construction is used to express what people do in general, rather than point to a specific person. The pattern is si plus a verb in the third person. The example used in the lesson was si dice, one says. Let's quickly look at a few more examples. Si chiama, one calls, as in one calls it a book. Si mangia, one eats, as in one eats a lot at Christmas. Si dorme, one sleeps, as in one sleeps late on Saturday.
Let's look at some more examples. Listen and repeat, or speak along with the native speakers.
Come si dice book in italiano?
Si dice libro.
Come si dice book in italiano? Come si dice pen in italiano?
Si dice penna.
Come si dice pen in italiano? Come si dice bag?
Si dice borsa.
Come si dice bag? Come si dice pencil in italiano?
Si dice matita.
Come si dice pencil in italiano?
Come si chiama questo?
Si chiama libro.
Come si chiama questo? Did you notice how I used a different sentence pattern?
Wondering how you can master these conversations even faster? Here's how. 1. Read along. You get the lesson conversation and translations inside our dialogue tool, so that you see each word as you hear it and understand it all. 2. Practice speaking. By shadowing what you hear, you can also record and compare yourself with native speakers with our voice recording tools. And 3. Take our assessment tests and see how much you remember. These tools are part of our Can-Do course. Just click the link in the description to get them.
Come si chiama questo?
What do you call this?
Come si chiama questo?
This literally means, what does one call this? But it translates as, what do you call this? To create this pattern, simply replace
Dice,
says with
chiama,
calls.
chiama, chiama.
After this, replace the English word with
Questo,
this.
questo, questo.
Recall,
In italiano.
in Italian, may be omitted if understood from context.
Come si chiama questo?
What do you call this?
Come si chiama questo?
This is a very useful pattern for using Italian to learn Italian. Do you remember the response, you call it a book?
Si chiama libro.
Again, simply replace
Dice,
says with
chiama,
calls.
chiama. Si chiama libro.
You call it a book.
Si chiama libro.
Let's review the key vocabulary.
Borsa,
Bag,
borsa, borsa. Penna,
pen,
penna, penna. Matita,
pencil,
matita, matita. Questo,
this,
questo, questo.
Let's review. Respond to the prompts by speaking aloud. Then repeat after me, focusing on pronunciation. Ready? Do you remember how to say Italian? Italiano. Italiano. And how to say in Italian? In italiano. In italiano. Do you remember how to say how? Come. Come. Do you remember how Ben asks, how do you say book in Italian?
Come si dice book in italiano?
Come si dice book in italiano? Do you remember how to say book? Libro. Libro. And do you remember how Federica says, you say book?
Si dice libro.
Si dice libro. Do you remember how to say this? Questo. Questo. And how to say, what do you call this? Come si chiama questo? Come si chiama questo?
Let's practice. Imagine you're Karen Lee, and you're having a language exchange lunch with Alessia Marino. You point to the pen and ask, how do you say pen in Italian? Ready?
Come si dice pen in italiano?
Si dice penna.
Listen again and repeat.
Come si dice pen in italiano? Come si dice pen in italiano?
Now you want to know the word for bag. Omit in Italian. Ready?
Come si dice bag?
Si dice borsa.
Listen again and repeat.
Come si dice bag? Come si dice bag?
Let's try one more. Imagine you're Sasha Lee and you're studying with your classmate at school, Martina. You point at a pencil and ask, "What do you call this?" Ready?
Come si chiama questo?
Si chiama matita.
Listen again and repeat.
Come si chiama questo? Come si chiama questo?
This is the end of this lesson.
Now, here's what you can do to cement this conversation in your head. Review the conversation with our dialogue tool and lesson transcripts. Study the key words and phrases with our spaced repetition flashcards. Review the key grammar and cultural tips inside the lesson notes. And test yourself with our assessment tests. So click the link in the description right now and sign up for your free lifetime account to access our Can-Do course.
Now you know how to ask how you say something in Italian. That's all there is to it. Keep practicing and move on to the next lesson.